Thank you to SEGA, ATLUS, and GameSight for providing the copy of the game for this review. All footage recorded on the PC version of the game. Shin Megami Tensei is a series that has been around for a very long time. So long in fact that it outdates the vast majority of video game franchises still standing today. And Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance is a new step for the series to show why it's stuck around for so long. This game is a re-release of the base game SMTV released exclusively for the Switch in 2021. And not only is it now available for all major platforms, but it's been drastically improved over the base game counterpart, and now sits comfortably as the definitive way to play the title. The gameplay is some of the best I've played as far as turn-based games go. The music is some of the greatest out of any Megaten game, and yes, this does include Persona titles. The dungeon design is amazing for the most part, and while the story had moments I didn't care for, overall it was a good experience and it was enjoyable enough for me to be invested the whole way through. Speaking of the story, let's go ahead and dive into that section of this review. Since this is a spoiler-free review, I can't talk about too much in depth, but I do want to talk about how I felt about it in general. Let's start with the positives. The main narrative and dilemma is actually very interesting. You, the protagonist, become a demon known as Nahubino after being transported to a mysterious world, this world being the true modern-day Tokyo, ravaged after the mighty battle of Armageddon between gods and demons. In this modern-day Tokyo is still an ongoing battle between angels and demons, one side striving for law and order, and the other side desiring all-out chaos, each side having their own justifications and ambitions for their own goals. As you explore this hellscape and interact with both angels and demons, you as the Nahubino can choose which path you want to take, those being law or chaos of course, but also a neutral option in the non-vengeance route of the game. But for this review, I will be focusing on the vengeance path as it is the new content of the re-release. The atmosphere of this game is dark, grungy, and metal. You were forced into this demonic form against your will essentially, and you have to become stronger to survive. Not only that, but you have to force the demons you fight to join you to gain the power you need to survive. So you have to walk a tightrope on choosing whether to slay the demons outright or to negotiate with them to add them to your repertoire. All of this going down in a broken, destroyed world you used to call your home. It's messed up, but it's also amazingly fun to experience, and it's well done. SMT as a series has always been fairly dark in this regard, so it's nice to see that Vengeance has held up in this aspect, and the whole atmosphere and dynamic of the demons works perfectly with the gameplay mechanics as well, but I'll talk about the gameplay more in depth when I get to that section of the video. What I will say though, is that the mythology and demons they chose for the main story, as well as sub-stories and general gameplay work perfectly for the setting and tone of the game. And if you take a look deeper into the mythology of each character, you can get a lot more than meets the eye with this game, just as every other SMT game excels at as well. If you're very knowledgeable about mythology, you might be able to piece things together that others wouldn't be able to right off. Back onto the topic of the routes you can take. The two main reps of Law and Chaos, Taito no Kami and Yoko Hiramine respectively, are two pretty great characters that bounce off of each other well. While they both have differing ideas about how the world is and how it should be, they show respect and kindness for one another, which lets you, the player, choose for yourself who you think is in the right with no real bias from either side, and lets you choose which path to go down for the main story. If you've never played an SMT game before, you might be wondering what I mean by them being the reps of Law and Chaos, so let me explain. SMT games are well known for the different endings you can choose depending on what moral choices you make throughout the games. If you envision a brighter future for the world and humanity, you might lean toward the law route. If you envision a dark route, you might go down the chaos route. And if you lean toward neither, then you may go down a path of neutrality. But as I mentioned before, the vengeance route doesn't have a neutral route, so you have to choose between chaos and law. There is an actual story reason for this, however, so it's not like they just removed it for the sake of removing it. If you do want to do a neutral route, you can go into the original storyline of the base game SMT5. You just have to choose the appropriate option when you start a new game, and the game will inform you of what choice you've made before you start. Whichever one you want to start with is fine, but for the sake of this review, I will be focusing on the new Vengeance route as I mentioned before. Back to the main story and some positives. I think the first half of the game is actually incredible. You're introduced to your main foes quite early on, you make connections to the characters around you, you learn what the purpose of your existence is, and stuff like that. It quickly gets you into the narrative without any fuss and does it in a way that makes you interested in what's going on. I'm fairly certain that within 30 to 45 minutes, I was past all of the initial tutorial and prologue and into the game itself. I think it's all pretty well written too. The majority of the decisions make logical sense, well, as much sense as a game about demons, gods, and what have you can make, and there wasn't anything major that came off as ridiculous. Really, I only have mostly positive things to say about the first half of the game. They did a good job with it, and the Conditional in particular are a very memorable group of characters that I loved, all having distinct personalities that go together very well. That being said, this leads me into the negatives about the story as well, which all lie in the second half of the game. There's no way for me to talk about much of this without spoilers, but all I'm gonna say is that the characters and story fell off for me around the halfway point. They dropped the ball on all the good things they had going for the narrative, and it doesn't pick back up to the same degree of the first half ever again, in my opinion. Some of the motivations for the characters doing what they do is really bad in some cases too. There's a side quest for a fairly important, kinda not side character that completely ruined that character for me entirely because of how unbelievably bad it was written. The only time the game picked up for me again in terms of story was near the very late game when everything finally came together, but I won't go any further than that. Honestly, I'm probably gonna have to make a spoiler review at some point of the story because I really want to talk about more of it, but I digress. Let me know if y'all want to see that though. Overall, I'd say the story is enjoyable despite its flaws, and while I can't say I felt it was great because of that second half, I'd still say it was good in general. Again though, that first half was fire, and that section of the game was what made working toward the ending worthwhile, because the ending I got was great, that being the law ending by the way. I can't comment on the chaos route because I didn't finish it, but hey, I'll do it someday. What I'll also get to someday, and that day being right this second, is the gameplay. If there is anything I can recommend SMTV Vengeance for above all else, it's absolutely the gameplay, because holy shit y'all, it is mind-blowing how fun they made this game from start to finish in this department. This game is the epitome of letting you do whatever the fuck you want. You want to be a physical god? Bam, you can live your Mike Tyson dreams. Want to be a magic Mike? Abracadabra bitch, hold this spell. The world is your oyster in this game, and not just you. You can make any demon whatever you want them to be. Speaking of the demons, I would like to touch on what I mentioned in the gameplay section about them more. That being how the demons match the atmosphere and tone of the game perfectly, not only narratively, but gameplay wise too. There isn't really any series that tops Megaton in the aspect of mythology in my opinion, because they give each demon such a great design, they give you the lore of the demons, and then they base the strengths and weaknesses of the demons on the lore. It is absolutely jaw-dropping to go through and see the literal hundreds of demons and designs they made for this game. The main way you get demons is through negotiation in this game. You can fuse demons together in the world of shadows, but before you can do that, you need to negotiate with them, which adds to that gritty atmosphere I mentioned before. Negotiations in this game are absolutely incredible too. They put a lot of effort into it. Each demon has unique dialogue for when you speak to them, and based on the mythology of what kind of being it is, dictates what you should or should not choose to say to them. For example, someone like Turdock might take a liking to you if you share your love for blood as he does. Someone like Incubus might want you to prove your strength to them. There are so many things to consider when it comes to what options to choose, and hell, sometimes they might even just throw a quiz onto you to see if you really know what you're talking about. Not only that, but the moon phases in game affect the mood of the demons as well. Some demons like a new moon, some demons like a full moon, it all depends on their character, and that is fucking dope. Negotiations are easily one of the best parts about this game because they are so unbelievably fun to do. More on the skills and all that though. You as the Nahobino have a privilege to skills that no other demon can have, so no matter what, you're always going to have the most utility. For example, there's a skill called Aramasa you get at the beginning of the game, and that's by far the best physical skill in the entire early game. In fact, you can make skills work almost the entire game if you want. I got over halfway through the entire game using Aramasa alone with the build I was going for, and that's something this game does the best. If you want to make something work, you just can. There's no rules or real meta on what you should or shouldn't use. No demon you can or can't use. Everything has a place and purpose, and it's not even just a Nahobino that has signature skills either. Demons in the game have their own unique skills as well. Take my glorious king, Yoshitsune, for example. He has Hasotobi in this game, and he's the only one that can have it. Yoshitsune is a good example of being able to make whatever you want work as well. You can acquire him at level 45, which is about mid-game range, and you'd think by the time you progress near the end or so, he'd be useless, right? Absolutely not. Oh my goodness, y'all, I made my Yoshitsune an actual god of the game, and there's a few reasons this is the case aside from just the skills. So you can acquire items to keep demons up to Nahobino's level in the Grimoires. which might seem broken, and it kinda is, but they're pretty scarce, so you can't just spam them on any demon you want. They're basically going to be reserved for demons you really like or really need. On top of all that, you can use incense items to raise the various stats of demons and yourself, although the ones for yourself are a lot more rare. After using a bunch of strength incense on my Yoshitsune, I had him well over 100 strength by the time I had beaten the game, and the result when I got into any encounter? Yeah, pure annihilation. Oh yeah, I can't believe I haven't said this yet, but you can genuinely put any skill onto any demon as long as it isn't one of the unique ones like Hasotobi or Amasa or whatever. You can put any physical skill, any magic skill, support skill, passive skill, whatever the hell you want onto any demon, and this is done through the Essence Fusion system. You can find the essence of demons by either gaining their trust in the Demon Haunt, which I'll go over in a minute, leveling them up, doing side missions, or just find it by exploring the world. The Demon Haunt is a safe space for you to chat with the demons you have in your stock, and good lord, this aspect of the game is so fun! You get insight onto how the demons feel about you, and you can gain their trust, which allows you to raise their stats and just get amazing dialogue options in general. This aspect of the game is something you just need to experience yourself to really understand how cool it can be. But basically, it lets you spend more time with the demons directly rather than doing negotiations or reading the lore. And on top of all of these dope skills and dope dialogue options and just dope everything I've talked about so far, there's also an affinity potential system that determines how efficient each demon is in a certain respect. Some demons might be super efficient with support and healing skills, but suck at physical attacks. Some might be strong with electricity and weak with support. And with how many types of skills there are in this game, it means that you're going to have to build up a wide range of demons in your arsenal, which is fine because you're given space to hold demons in your stock. And you can increase this stock by unlocking miracles as they're called in the game, which gives me an excuse to go into the miracle system now. The miracle system exists just to give you more and more options on top of what is already provided, and it's also where you can make your Nahobino proficient in whatever sort of skill you want them to be good at. There are mastery skills for each type of affinity, including even almighty skills and support skills, so you can do whatever you want. It's honestly crazy, and even aside from stuff like that, there's also miracles to add quality of life stuff to the game. For example, there are miracles that can lower the cost of items in the main shop, lower the cost of summoning demons from the compendium, making negotiations easier, and much more as shown on screen. Realistically, you probably won't be able to have every miracle in one playthrough, but hey, that's what makes it fun because it adds replay value and makes you think harder about what kind of skills you want to be good with. But regardless of what you choose, you can beat the game as long as you know what you're doing. I've talked about all these amazing things the game lets you do, so once you actually get into the guts of the game, what is the actual turn-based combat like? Well, let me go over that now because we've got the foreplay done. SMT games use a system called press turns, and the amount of allies you have on the field is the amount of baseline press turns you have. So 4 ideally, but by getting crits, hitting weaknesses, passing turns, and more, you can add additional turns during a battle, so you can go upwards of 8 to even more actions in one turn if you set up properly. Since there are so damn many skills you can use, and since this game is quite challenging at times, every battle is like a mini game of chess where you're trying to find the best way to absolutely destroy your enemies in as few turns as possible, and the press turn system is the way to do this. There's also one last skill type I need to talk about, and I've waited this long because both you and the enemies can use it, and it's the Magatsuhi skills. The one you get at the beginning of the game, and the one that's probably the best in my opinion, is the Amogotoki Critical Magatsuhi skill. When activated, this makes every attack, including magic attacks, a critical hit. Even if the enemy resists, you can crit through the resistance. And good lord y'all, this makes the press turn system your bitch. If you have a good build, then there isn't anything aside from boss battles that's probably going to survive a turn with this pot. You unlock hella more of these skills though, like dozens more, so you can just do whatever you want, man. I don't even know what else to say at this point. Some of the skills are better for damage and offense in general, some are oriented around defense, but basically it's kind of like your normal skills if they were on steroids. But don't forget, the enemies can use these too, and if you don't prepare for the turn where they have this activated, then it makes it high stakes and fun, because honestly, if you were the only one able to use these skills, then the game would be way too easy. But as it is right now, I think it's actually a pretty great balance. Not impossibly hard, not too easy, just right. and I think Vengeance is easily the best game to get into the SMT series with now. But it's not like the other ones are bad, don't get me wrong. I'm bound to have missed some things with the combat, but I hope I made it clear that you have limitless options to play around with in this game, and it's low-key addicting if I'm being honest. The last thing I'll mention for the gameplay, and this is huge, is that you can quick save wherever and whenever you want. Let's say you're a parent and you gotta go check on your kid and aren't anywhere near a main save point. Well, just press the save button and you're good to go with no worry of losing your progress or anything like that. An amazing addition in my opinion. Besides the actual gameplay itself, you're going to be spending a lot of time roaming the several dungeons the game has to offer, and I think the dungeons are all pretty great. There's only one dungeon I thought was bad in this game, and it's near the end, but other than that, they were all pretty fun to explore for me. You can find treasure, items, healing, side missions, and a whole plethora of things as you explore each area, and each area has a distinct look and sound to them. You will never be confused of which dungeon is which because visually they are very different. And each time you enter a new area, a new song will play as well, just as an indicator. And dude, these songs are straight fucking bumping. You're actually encouraged to explore each area to the best of your ability as well. And this is because of the abscesses and the Memon you can find throughout the game. As I mentioned earlier, you can purchase miracles to make your Nahobino, or a game in general, a bit stronger or easier. But to purchase these, you need to unlock them and also obtain glory, which is the currency used to unlock them. To find glory, you need to explore each dungeon and find a cluster of them, and to unlock the skills, you have to defeat the abscesses, which are more or less mini boss fights for you to fight, and they're really fun in my opinion actually. The Memon are the collectible type of this game. They are cute little guys that are scattered throughout most dungeons of the game, and each time you find one, you are awarded a small sum of glory. The amount increases dungeon by dungeon, and there are a total of 200 of them, so your ass is going to be looking for these things for a while. Thankfully, there are ways to see all of them on the map once you progress and talk to the correct people, but until then, you're on your own. Since you basically have to explore all of these dungeons to an extensive degree, the real question is, are they actually fun to go through? For the most part, I'd say yes, and this is mainly because of the Magatsu rail system, which lets you more or less fast travel from place to place, and it makes the pacing of the dungeons so much better than they otherwise would be. Had this game not had Magatsu rails, the dungeons would honestly be kinda ass to go through. And believe it or not, the original game on Switch did not have these, so thankfully ATLUS learned their lesson because that's a game changer honestly. Some might argue things like this make the game easier, and you would be right, but in my opinion this just makes it less annoying, so it's worth it. The dungeon crawling took way longer than it needed to in the original game, and it's not like the dungeon crawling is non-existent just because they made exploring the areas more convenient. Same thing with the quick save feature too, you can just choose not to abuse it. You control the buttons you press, so you don't even need to use them if you don't want to. I don't use them all the time myself. I'd also like to touch on the side quests real quick because they do play a large part in the dungeon aspect as well. There are a metric fuck ton of side quests in this game, dude. I don't mean this in a bad way either, this is a good thing, but if you're a completionist like me, you got your work cut out for you, that's all I'm gonna say. These side missions all have unique storylines and can give you amazing rewards, such as demons joining your party and stuff like that. Some side missions even give you a choice on which side to go with, and these small choices can have a small impact on the kind of ending you get as well, which is dope. I like that the side quests give you a reason to return to the other dungeon areas as well. You might be given a quest that you're way under leveled to complete in a certain area, so once you progress the game more, you can return and kick some ass where you once got stuck. There's a quest in the first dungeon like that where a dragon will ask you to defeat 4 strong enemies. Then after you do that, you have to fight him, and each time the enemies get stronger of course. And I really like that aspect of the side missions, it feels like you have a good progression gameplay wise. Of course, there are plenty of side quests that you can complete immediately as well, so there's a good balance. One last thing that made the dungeons great as well was the actual world building they did with the demons you can interact with. Aside from side missions, main missions, and what have you, roaming throughout the world are just plain, normal demons you can speak to that provide insight on how they feel about and see things. And depending on your progress in the story, they can change. Small things like this go a very long way in making the world feel more alive, and without it, the dungeons would feel pretty bland, at least in comparison to how they are now. It adds a lot of context and value for sure. The last thing I'll go over for this video is the music. All the music I've used in this video has been from this game's OST. And to be honest, it's easily some of the greatest music in all of Mega 10. Every time I heard a new song, I was thrown off guard because it felt like every song was pretty damn different from one another, and then bam, it's a fucking banger. Straight up, I'm just gonna make a small montage of all the music and just let it speak for itself because I can't do it justice through words. So yeah, it's just peak video game music for me. And with the music wrapped up, I've now covered every major thing I think is worth going over for this title. Overall, Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance is one of the greatest games I've played and probably will play this year. And ATLUS has done a great job giving this series the spotlight it deserves. More eyes than ever before are on the mainline SMT series, and it gives me good hope for the future of the series. This game deserves all the praise and reception it has received, and I hope ATLUS continues to push the boundaries for this series because they've set themselves up for true success with this one. Overall, I'd give this game a 9 out of 10. The only reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is because of the issues with the story. But other than that, man, it's a great damn game and I truly recommend it. That's going to be it from me on this spoiler-free review though. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game in the comments below. With all of that being said, thank you all for watching, and thank you again to SEGA, ATLUS, and GameSight for providing the game for this review. It's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out everyone, and have a great day.